So Taylor, you are climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so spur of the moment decision happened at a jazz game last year. One of my good friends from Qualtrics, he's turning 40 this year. I'm turning 40 this year, so he said, "Hey, we've got to go and prove to the world that we can still do hard things as we get older." And so I said, "Count me in." But we leave in about 5 weeks now, July 17th, and we'll be heading out. So definitely looking forward to it.
That's incredible. I saw your post on LinkedIn about it, about you comparing some of the lessons about the potential hardships you're going to face to the sales profession, which I thought that was great insight. I actually climbed in Nepal to about 20,000 feet above sea level, and it's very challenging when you start to get high altitude, as I'm sure you know. So I'll be eager to hear how that goes. But guys, we are joined by Taylor Safford. He is the head of commercial sales at Taxbit, and we'll actually touch on cryptocurrency at the end of today's podcast. He's played a really big role in my career, which we'll talk about as well, helping me go from an SDR to an account executive. And I think something that's interesting about you, Taylor, is you were one of the first dozen or so employees at Qualtrics, my current employer, and you helped grow the company to over $1 billion in revenue, SAP acquisition. So when you think about startup experience and going in the basement, the trenches, and making it happen, you really embody that. So I look forward to diving into that here today. I know that when we spoke early on, the first time we met, you said you were thinking about joining the FBI, and all of a sudden you end up working for a small startup in a basement.
Yeah, if John DiAgostino ever sees this, he's going to be cracking up. That was definitely a surprise when he found that out about me. But yeah, that was the plan. Well, I guess going back to my undergraduate degree, finance and statistics, how does that lead to sales? And it was more or less kind of viewed as a job of last resort in Provo, Utah, at this small little tech company. There were about 18 employees at the time. And I'd already set up these, pursuing an MBA at a top 5 MBA program. I was very fortunate to get in there. And then the plan after that was, some intrigue and definite interest within the FBI, counterterrorism, counterintelligence. And that was the plan. And things changed pretty drastically, I'd say, and had an amazing 12-year run at Qualtrics, and saw it grow from, 17, 18 employees to 4,000 to 5,000 employees and close to $1 billion in revenue right before I left. So a lot of fun and a lot of hard work in there.
Talk about the early days, because when you were taking a product that may not be completely have the product market fit, it can be very challenging. I mean, you call someone and you say, "Hey, this is Taylor from XYZ company. Does my name ring a bell?" I'm sure 10 times out of 10, they said no. So how is that for a brand new sales rep going into an environment with probably not much structure, not a whole lot of training, and just constant battles day to day? Talk about some of those early days.
Yeah, it was hard. I guess I'll share a personal story first and get into very specifics there. But when I started, I was this math nerd, big glasses. I guess glasses haven't changed. And they threw me into sales, and I really didn't know what I was doing. There was definite intrigue and interest. But very quickly, I had to face a stark reality and of starting out and having a poor attitude and mentality and perception of what I was doing. And so I tried quitting probably 20 different times. I'd go in and Ryan Smith, the CEO, took me under his wing and really mentored me. But during that time, I'd go in and say, "Ryan, why am I here? I'm in Provo, Utah at this startup. My wife makes more as a part-time waitress. There's no benefits. Like this isn't a great opportunity. I'm moving on." And somehow, some way, he talked me out of it. And finally, it came to the 21st time, or who knows how many times. And I went in there and said, "Ryan, this just isn't a good fit. I'm going to pursue my MBA. I've worked really hard to get in there. It's a great opportunity." And he said, "Hey, you know what? I'm sick of these conversations. You are too. Best of luck." And I grabbed the door and I was walking out, and he said, "Hey, one last thing. Until you've decided to go all in, you'll never find the success that you want, regardless of what you choose to do in life." And it was one of those moments where it was somewhat of an emotionally charged conversation, and I knew he was right, but there was no way I was acknowledging it. So I went back to my desk. I cleaned off half my desk, and my gut instinct was still telling me that there was something here. And I don't know why, because all my buddies were kind of razzing me and giving me a hard time that I was at this small startup. And in Provo, Utah, of all places, which there was no very successful startups at that time, maybe Novell, WordPerfect, years before. And so what did I do? Instead of leaving in that moment, I actually put together a plan, 12-month plan to go from one of the worst performing account executives to the best performing account executive. And I went in and slammed it on his desk and I said, I'm all in. And I walked out and I got to work. And there were some very distinct differences that changed that really propelled my career. One, I was all in. There were no other options. Second, I stopped blaming other people for my lack of success. Whether or not I didn't get the leads that I wanted, whether or not, comparisons with other individuals, whatever that was, the excuses were out the door. And then, the third thing that really stood out to me was, Kobe Bryant. He'd always say, fall in love with the journey, not the destination. And I literally set aside all expectations with quota. I didn't even care about quota. I wasn't even tracking it because I was one of the worst performing, so why track it anyway? What became more important to me was, what are the successful metrics on a daily and weekly basis that I can go and find psychological rewards of hitting, because there was no way I was hitting my quota. And so I dove all into those items and really found what were the key KPIs for me. And I became exceptionally good at those. And it took me a lot of time and effort because I wasn't naturally as gifted, nor had I put in the time and effort to be as good on a competency or skill level as my peers, because they'd put in more time and effort. I had provided more excuses and complaining. So there was a lot of work for me to do, but those three things really stuck out to me. I mean, besides that, the environment at Qualtrics, it was one of the first tech companies at that point here in Utah, modern day tech companies, kind of the birth of the Silicon Slopes here. So there weren't too many options. It was new. People really didn't know what was going on. You're really selling surveys. Can that even be a thing? So there were a lot of interesting, environments. And then to throw on top of that trend, it was the 2008 financial crisis when I had joined. And that was adding into obviously a very complex talent market, opportunity market as well. So that's what it looked like when I first got there, 18 employees and, going through all of those emotions, and all of us were trying to figure it out. But there was a lot of personal battles that I was in need of overcoming.
Evolving from a math nerd, quote unquote, to what you become today. It's incredible. In the story you just told, it's a similar story that you told me in my early days as an SDR, and it had such a big impact. So I can't reiterate to everyone listening enough. Ask yourself, what does all in actually mean? And just burning the ships and saying, we're going to take the island. I remember coming to you. They said, yeah, Taylor, he leads the office. He's the guy. He's been here the longest. You wanted to go talk to him. And you sent out a message in the group chat. You said, hey, I'm going to do office hours. I'm just sitting at my desk. I'm a few weeks in. I'm pretty nervous. I had come off my first month with the quota as an SDR. I was one of the lowest performers. And I said, I don't know what's going on. It's sales for me, blah, all the excuses in the book. And I go up to you and I say, Taylor, what should I do? And you say, are you truly all in? And at the time it was, well, maybe if this doesn't work out, I'll just move home. Maybe I'll just go find another job that pays me more, that gives me the promotion without actually having to do the work. And once I really embodied going all in, saying, you know what? I'm just going to, what that looked like to me was just making more calls than everyone else. I didn't come in naturally talented. I didn't know what I was saying, what I was doing. It was just, if the expectation is 80 calls a day and 20 minds or prospecting efforts, I'll just do 100 calls and 30 prospecting efforts a day. And over time, that helped me get good. So I want to acknowledge you. That advice played such a big role in my career. So I hope someone out there listening can take that and say, hey, maybe I can go all in as well. Any other instrumental lessons that you learned from Ryan Smith in the early days throughout that journey building the company?
Oh, yeah. A number of lessons come to mind. I probably don't want to list too many, but, being all in. Startups are hard. I think that's another, key piece just to acknowledge is that I think too often people are enamored with startup stories, but they neglect to acknowledge the startup energy that's required to create something like that. Startups are hard. Thinking about if I were to summarize it, maybe two others just to keep in mind. One is kind of that building on that mentality, but the success formula. What does the success formula look like? I think a lot of us get advice from different mentors or leaders that cover a lot of different topics, but looking back over those 12 years, the success formula that was direly needed to be implemented from my standpoint and in my career were comprised of three things. One is patience, two is consistency, and three is determination. And I think when I looked at myself and I realized all three of those things were lacking. I wanted something better. I wanted benefits. I wanted to make more than $6 an hour. There were a lot of things that I was not patient with to really embrace that environment. I wasn't consistent. I wasn't, determined to have success there. So that success formula was really, really important and vital in my career. Something that you probably heard me say at Qualtrics a few times. I know Kelsey Larson and others have kind of embraced this, but good times are never as good as we perceive them to be, and bad times are never as bad as they feel. And in sales, we're interesting creatures. Yes, we're creatures of habit, but I think sometimes sales can be quite the emotional roller coaster. And so it's important to acknowledge that times are fleeting. Not necessarily that we won't experience a lot of very high highs and great achievements. When I say good times are never as good as we perceive them to be. But the whole point in that lesson is that times are fleeting. Just as I was the worst performing AE, 12 months later, I became the top performing AE and was the fastest to hit $1 million in revenue. I still beat my Qualtrics twin, Lucas, to that point, even though he was one of the most consistent.
Shout out, Lucas.
I love Lucas. So, I think that mentality is important. And I think the last one that really helped me came from one of my colleagues, Heidi Larson, one of the all-time greats. I think she's possibly the top two all-time, best salespeople there at Qualtrics. But Heidi was so talented in a number of ways, but she taught me the importance of understanding the difference between success and winning. And winning is this concept where it's finite. Like, did we win the race? I always focus on this Derek Redmond example from the 1992 Barcelona Olympics. And by far, he was one of the favorites, and he ended up tearing a hamstring halfway through his 400-meter race. He didn't win. Like, it was very clear that he didn't win, but he didn't quit. And he got himself up off the ground after he tore his hamstring and finished the race with the help of his father coming out of the stands. And he was in tears, caught up in emotion and in pain. Was he successful? By far, it's the most viewed YouTube channel. They still interview him almost every single year from an Olympic standpoint. No one, I think very few people remember who won the 1992 Barcelona Olympic gold in the 400 meters, but everyone remembers Derek Redmond. And Heidi taught me this principle of winning in sales is you hit or you miss your quota. You win or you lose. But there are other key successful metrics that we should always be considering and ensuring that we're successful day in and day out, week in and week out, to increase our probability of winning. And so that was another profound principle. I mean, there's a whole host of others, but those are a couple that stand out to me that were very transformative for myself and the teams that I led at Qualtrics.
As you think about success metrics, you now have the perspective of a leader at the highest level, seeing across the business what's going on, individual reps, different leaders, different teams. And we had Maria on a past episode who you know well, works at Qualtrics. She leads our SDR team, all of it. And she talks about winning the day. So, of course, winning the quarter, that's the binary. Did you hit quota? Yes, no. But these small victories actually lead up to these large victories as well, and we call it winning the day. So what does a successful day look like, whether it be an SDR hitting a certain prospecting target or an account executive prospecting and qualifying opportunities or progressing deals, whatever it may be. As you think about success metrics in your eyes today, what are some of those metrics that you are coaching your reps on, whether it be SDRs, account executives, to be more successful in their sales jobs?
Yeah. Well, That probably will vary from company to company and industry to industry. At Qualtrics, looking back over 12 years, hundreds of thousands of prospecting calls, meetings completed, tens of thousands of opportunities created and closed. We actually identified and came back and realized that there were 4 critical ratios that were statistically correlated to driving quota attainment. And what are those? These, very, very well, Trent. But, it was set rate, op conversion rate, win rate, and average deal size or projected average deal size. And so when you look at more of a mid-market to lower large enterprise sales motion, those continue to come top of mind. As we zoom out and looked at the data, we also understood at the enterprise level that having more frequent, valuable conversations were also a very high statistical driver of short-term and long-term success on the enterprise side. So what does that mean? We broke that down at Qualtrics into a number of key areas, but those were the 5 as we looked across both our mid-market team and our enterprise team that now has well over 800 to 1,000 employees on the sales team there. But those were critical KPIs. I think as I zoom out as a leader, though, from the individual KPI level, prior to my departure at Qualtrics, I started interviewing all of these leaders. I became exceptionally intrigued with what drives a successful team, and then what also kind of impedes the progress of these teams to make it a non-successful team or non-winning team. And it always came down to 3 things: people, process, resources. People could be broken out into 3 distinct areas: team, culture, and vision. Process is broken out into 2 areas: skills and activities. And then resources always broken out into 3 things: systems, monetary investments, and time. And meeting with all of these different leaders, it really always came back to those 3. So at the individual level, those are the KPIs that, from a statistical, perspective, those were the KPIs that drove success. At the leadership level and at the team level, it was very important for the leader to pay attention to those 3 things to ensure that there was success, given that the leader's job is to ensure that the team members on my team or on any of our teams have more success. So hopefully that answered your question both at the individual and the leadership level.
So much value in the last 4 minutes. I'm going to have to go back and watch it to take notes myself because I'm trying to actively listen while also asking the best questions that will add value to the audience. So that's really fantastic. As you think about your career path, Taylor, you've done what a lot of people aspire to do: joining a startup early on, having an exit, now being at another great startup. I'm sure you asked yourself the question at one point, should I just be a great sales rep, individual contributor? You got to $1 million in sales pretty early in your career, which is a big milestone that I'm trying to achieve. But now you are a leader in sales. How did you decide that you wanted to pursue the leadership route?
That's a great question. I think naturally at Qualtrics, we only had one career path. So it was, if you wanted to make more money, you had to go into leadership, which I think any like behavioral psychologist, study of human behavior, and any consultative service would say, hey, please don't ever do that again, because we got a lot of folks into leadership positions that didn't necessarily want to be there. I think it went back, Trent, to my struggle and the help that Ryan personally provided me. He personally mentored me. He taught me how to sell. But there were a lot of struggles there to where numerous times, I'd come home and it just felt like there was no way out. I would never reach that next step. And then constantly my wife doesn't know what's going on. So she'd be like, hey, she'd encourage me to quit probably 20 times a day. Because she's like, hey, this isn't going anywhere, and I make more as a part-time waitress, just as a reminder. But I think it goes back to those emotions. And initially, my decision getting into leadership was twofold. Outside of my family, what drives more success or fosters more success in my life, both personally and career, is seeing those around me succeed. I love it. I think Simon Sinek said it best. He said, leadership is not a rank or a position to be attained. Leadership is a service to be given. And so that was something to where very early on, I loved seeing those around me succeed. I think there was also a second one that was really driving me to head in that direction, which was the pain and suffering that I had actually incurred and experienced. It was this natural driving influence to where I didn't want anyone else to have to go through that. And I felt, since I had lived in that environment for a long time, that I could help people avoid that. Or when they actually find themselves in that, I could help them get out of that at a faster pace. And so more often than not, that held true during my 12 years. I think there were very few occasions where, I necessarily couldn't help that individual succeed and they found a better opportunity elsewhere. But those two were, I would say, very strong driving influences at encouraging me to pursue leadership back in the early days at Qualtrics.
And now you are currently the head of commercial sales at Taxbit. Massive funding round last year, as we talked about. Big expectations this year. Need to continue headcount, revenue growth, all of that. What does a day in the life look like today?
Yeah, so depending on when you choose to start any company, whether that's a startup or whether it's SAP with tens of thousands of employees, there are different environments and different job responsibilities that accompany specific roles or titles. Usually when we think of, a VP of sales, it's someone that, is not necessarily getting into the day-to-day, but at a startup, that's different. And so, here at Taxbit, I've really rewound kind of my job responsibilities to where 13, 14 years ago, I was a frontline leader. I'm doing that again, as we continue to scale the team, and it's a lot of fun. It brings back a lot of memories. And right now we've gone out and hired a great initial kind of landing team, so to speak, on the sales side, primarily focused on larger enterprises, and helping establish what our leadership operating rhythm is, building out our systems and processes. What are the KPIs that we're tracking across activities and skills? What monetary investments do we need to make? What does that team and culture look like? Instead of actually deciding what our leadership principles would be on the sales side, I actually had our first cohort just take a half day and they decided what our leadership principles were. So it's a lot of these putting in the foundation so that we can go and scale. And we're right at that precipice to where now we're entering this hyperscale mode. And you'll start to see that on the sales side to where then, I think day to day will change a little bit, getting into second and third line leadership, fourth line leadership, which I'm more familiar with and definitely looking forward to it, but embracing the current job responsibilities right now, more or less, deal coaching, getting in the weeds and really helping folks progress their pipeline.
I'm sure it's really cool seeing folks go through a similar experience that you had gone through over a decade ago, trying to find your footing, saying, wow, this is really hard. Is this for me? What does all in mean to me? And finding that balance. And you having all of that experience, based on your reps, I know folks work enterprise deals or smaller deals, whatever it may be. If you could wave a wand and say, I want my reps to do this one thing more often, and then this one thing I wish they would stop doing more often. I'm just curious if you have any insights based on seeing actual frontline deals and helping coach folks on deals. If there's any just general best practices that you can take away from that other sales reps out there can maybe apply in their job to do one thing and then to take away one thing that may be hindering their success.
Yeah. One thing that I would encourage them to continue to do or start doing now is be empathetic. Empathetic is vital, especially at the enterprise level. And what I mean by that is effective salespeople, they make themselves trusted business partners or advisors that really live selflessly in the customer's shoes. And if they can do that, they'll understand how their business operates. Where we can actually drive value, the valuable conversations that we should be having, the individuals that we should be involving at that prospective customer or that entity. So I think empathy is something that typically is rarely discussed, I would say, in sales meetings or sales trainings, but it's such a vital element. I think that's something that you do very well, Trent, is, before I think it was more of a numbers game, and you've really learned how to actually infuse your numbers game mentality and your hard work and your work ethic with this empathy. and it's starting to pay off in droves. And that's why, you probably never missed a quota, or at least that was one of the recent LinkedIn updates. I haven't been at Qualtrics for a few years, so I don't have those reports in front of me, but something to stop doing or to avoid or just to be aware of is, I think there's this notion naturally within sales, given that we operate more on a quarterly basis or quarterly quotas, annual quotas, to where we always need to be going fast. And I would say, like, stop going so fast. Now, people could misconstrue that and say, oh, well, Taylor, you're telling me to take it easy. I don't have to make that many prospecting calls or, at that many outreaches. And that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is that there's an adage, and John McMahon wrote The Qualified Sales Leader. I was just thinking of that. And he shares this adage of slow down to go fast. And what he means by that is just to ensure that we are actually paying attention to all these moving pieces and complexity that is always present during a sales motion, and just to be aware of it. And so stop going so fast and make sure that we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's. And even to the point where, insert your notes into Salesforce, help this, the CS team, help a lot of these other groups that pull insights from those reports. I think sometimes, we in sales, we just move so quickly. So those would be the two things that, one, start doing or continue to do. And then on the flip side, something to stop doing or just to be aware of.
Based on all of the great quotes you've pulled out, it's clear that you're always learning, evolving, and I'm sure the math nerd 12, 13 years ago would be proud of what the Taylor has grown into today, nearing age 40, about to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, growing startups. What is your relationship with a growth mentality and always learning? Because it seems like you're pulling from a lot of resources that I'm sure that have helped you grow, expand your perspective. What does that look like for you today, self-development?
Yeah. This was something that became exceptionally critical earlier in my career, and actually one of my top regrets. The president of Qualtrics actually led all of Google Asia, 1/3 of all of the Google searches in the entire world, and he came over to Qualtrics. And one day I get an email from his EA, and it says, "Hey, Jared wants to meet with you." And immediately I'm freaking out. I can't even think about what my meetings were, during the interim of when I got the email and when I responded. I kept thinking about it. I'm like, what did I say? What did I do? Why am I getting fired? And going back to the adage of, bad times are never as bad as they feel, totally threw that thought right out the window. And, responded back and said, hey, just want to make sure I'm prepared going into this conversation with Jared. And she totally saw through it. And she's like, Taylor, you're not getting fired, smiley face. Jared just wants to, start mentoring you. And it was an opportunity to meet with an incredibly brilliant business leader. And I look back, and I didn't take the time to prepare to make sure that every session was exceptionally valuable. And that was on me. And the reason why it was on me is I didn't allocate the time from a calendaring perspective to organize my day and my week to take advantage of that session. And so what do I do now? I leverage my calendar. I schedule times and set aside time specifically for self-development, for specific activities, and I hold myself accountable to my calendar. I know it doesn't sound fun, and trust me, it's not really that fun, because Friday afternoon, our mental capacity is decreasing, or our mental power, and I've got, these 3 or 4 things on my calendar. But Jared always said, the more that you actually hold yourself accountable to your calendar, the more success that you'll find. And so now, I take advantage of those scheduled times. I take advantage of the times that, I'm driving to and from work. I think that's a stereotypical answer that everyone really kind of gives on these podcasts is, take advantage of the moments that are not necessarily as busy, where we can listen to podcasts like yours, which I did listen to yours and Maria's and a few others, in my car to and from work. But take advantage of those moments, but also don't prioritize those self-enablement moments over your family and over your friends and over doing those things that can create phenomenal memories. Because I look back and I missed a lot of those because I prioritized my career. But I think the more accountable that I've held myself to my calendar, the more opportunity that I provide myself to not only learn faster and to increase my breadth of knowledge, but also to make sure that I'm creating those memories and I'm training enough to hopefully make it to the top of Kilimanjaro. So
I'm confident you will, Taylor. What I want to finish with here is Taxbit. Quick plug here. I'm sure you guys have open roles, and for those top sales folks out there who are looking for new opportunities, absolutely consider Taxbit. Great company, great leaders, and what I'm reading online is the most trusted platform that unifies digital assets, tax and accounting across enterprises, consumers, governments. And you play a really important role. You almost have infrastructure as a part of this Web3, crypto, DeFi economy. And I'm throwing out buzzwords at this point. I can't speak too deeply to it. But why it's I know it's SaaS, which is my favorite business model. And you're also in this crypto digital asset space, which is booming. And I think a lot of people are interested by it, but probably don't fully understand it. Maybe somebody has a Coinbase account and owns some Bitcoin or Ethereum, whatever it may be. That's my case. Why this move, and how do you see the landscape of crypto digital assets playing out over the next few years?
Yeah, I probably shouldn't say this because now it's going to be public, but like I had a little bit more of a skeptical belief or a little bit of skepticism as to the longevity of crypto and digital assets prior to joining Taxbit. But the more that I've continued to jump into it, the more that I realize I don't know, I still have so much more to learn. There's three things that create a massive wave of opportunity or can create that massive wave of opportunity for all of us in our careers, and it's industry, company, and people. And when you think about that, you want to always typically find yourself in massively fast-growing industries, differentiated companies that provide differentiated solutions, and then great people, because I've never seen a great company without a phenomenal team. It's just not individuals, it's teams. And so Taxbit checked the box of all three of those. We recently met with some of the folks at Deloitte, and they're just like, this is the fastest growing industry that we've ever seen. And it's really in like the bottom of the first or second inning. There's still so much more, runway here to go within this industry. Taxbit is the only entity in our space that actually combines an automated tax and accounting piece together that really automates all things tax and accounting for digital assets. So crypto, NFTs, DeFi, et cetera. And when you think about that and pair it with incredibly talented and very intelligent people, I'm like as half as intelligent and talented as probably everyone else here. It's absolutely incredible. But when you think about that, Taxbit is not a nice to have. For years I've been at companies where it's a nice to have and I'm justifying budget. Taxbit is a have to have. There are regulations that have already hit, and there are future regulations coming. A bill was just presented this week on the Senate floor, and so this is a solution that is a have to have, and it's we're helping pioneer this industry, and one of the fastest growing industries that anyone's ever seen in their careers. So, really exciting times. Crypto, digital assets, in general, I think are a little bit hard to understand. But once you get into it, you actually start realizing you learn by doing, kind of like a lot of things in life. And it's a lot of fun once you jumped into it.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm wishing you guys nothing but continued success. Taylor, thanks so much for your time here today. Guys, I'm going to include a link to Taylor's LinkedIn below. Go connect with him. Go let him know how much you enjoyed today's episode. Subscribe to the podcast now. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks, Trent. Great to see you.